A Seed for a Friend by Zack Meyers. Once upon a time there lived a squirrel in a large oak tree in the woods by a stream. This squirrel was a dedicated and hard worker, always looking about for nuts and seeds to store away in his oak tree home in the deep woods. One fine autumn morning, the squirrel was roaming about the wood, searching for newly fallen items for his storing and later eating, when he saw a little hole in the ground not far from his tree home. The hole was small, but not altogether tiny, and it looked as if it was freshly dug. The squirrel sniffed around the hole, and then suddenly backed away as a small furry face of a chipmunk popped out of the hole. He looked up at the squirrel with a quick "Ah!" and ducked back into the hole. The squirrel was shocked, but not quite as shocked as the chipmunk, who was still out of sight. "I say there, little friend, don't be alarmed. I was just out and about checking my local trees and such, and I didn't mean to frighten you." The squirrel did not move closer to the hole, but rather sat still and waited. The small nose of the chipmunk was all the squirrel could see when a soft voice came.
"I'm quite certain I didn't know you lived nearby, my big fellow, sir, and I'm sure I will find a new place so as not to disturb you again."
The voice was quick and scared-sounding, and the little nose once again disappeared down the dark hole. The squirrel, knowing the little chipmunk was afraid of him, said back, "Oh, my goodness, no! You mustn't leave on my condition. You are welcome, dear little furry friend. Please stay, and let's have no more talk of this leaving business." The little furry nose once again appeared from the dark and said,
"Are you quite sure, sir?"
"Why, of course," said the squirrel in return, and without a delay the chipmunk scurried out of the hole and sat up facing the squirrel.
"How kind, generous you are, my great friend, for allowing me to stay in your wood."
And he gave a little bow to the squirrel. The squirrel returned the bow straight away and said, "The company shall be my pleasure, you are to be sure." And he smiled at the little chipmunk, who returned it. One morning, about a week later, the weather had taken a turn for the colder, and it was clear the autumn season was coming to an end. On that crisp morning, the squirrel was roaming about near his tree and spotted the chipmunk sitting on a log and nibbling away at a rather large acorn, when he at once put it down and said,
"Ahoy there, neighbour,"
with a big smile. The squirrel said, "Hello there, my little friend. And how are you coming with your new home for this winter quickly approaching?" The chipmunk scurried over at once and said,
"It's doing very well indeed. I have the first entrance here at the bottom of this little hill, and my home is way up inside the hill at the top. It'll be perfect for storing all my food this winter."
The squirrel looked at the small hole in the ground and smiled. "Well done! I suspect you have noticed the change in weather we are having today." And the chipmunk said,
"Oh, yes, indeed. It seems as if it's only a matter of time before we see the beautiful crystal flakes of the winter snow upon us. I must tell you, I'm quite looking forward to it."
The squirrel, feeling this newest little friend to the wood would be doing quite fine, said, "Well, keep up the good work. I expect I'll see you again soon." And with that, the squirrel continued on his way, searching the forest ground for nuts and seeds for the fast-approaching winter. About a week later, the squirrel was tucked up and away in his cozy oak home when his nose awoke to the smell of lightning in the air. The squirrel opened one eye slowly. It was dark. It It could not even be 9:30, thought the squirrel. The temperature was still cold, but not freezing. And without a second to waste, the lightning and thunder cracked alive overtopped the forest above, and the woods were filled with the sound of rain. Down it came all night long, pooling up in low places of the ground, and generally soaking everything in sight. The following morning, the rain continued to fall. The squirrel, knowing the importance of having enough food, went out in search of more winter stock. He had not gone far when he passed by the hill in which the chipmunk lived. The bottom of the hill was a changed sight, as it was now a small pond of water. The squirrel looked at the water and wondered if the chipmunk had even noticed it begun to rain yet, when out of the middle of the pond came the chipmunk, gasping for breath and paddling toward the water's edge. "Here, my dear fellow, let me help," said the squirrel as he sprang into the water and helped the little chipmunk to land.
Thank you, sir. I wasn't expecting this weather, you know.
"I should have mentioned earlier, we often receive late showers in this part of the wood," said the squirrel.
"Oh, no worries, my friend. I just need a place to dry while I wait for the waters to go down,"
replied the chipmunk. And, having a temporary holding place for his food, before taking it inside his home, the chipmunk scurried under a tree whose roots were exposed, providing the perfect small cover for food and, currently, shelter. The squirrel smiled and continued on his search for food. Later that night, the rain stopped, and it settled down in the forest, all sounds beginning to get quieter and quieter, until it was silent in the forest, the coldness of the frost coating the wet floor of the wood, and still the squirrel slept on. When morning came, the squirrel's nose told it of many things at once. For the first thing, the air was far less full of smells than normal, and the temperature of the air seemed to wake the squirrel up even faster. The squirrel peeked his head out of the oak tree where he lived and saw the entire forest was covered in the most dazzling white. Every tree and branch was covered in crystallized ice and snow. The squirrel at once thought of his friend the chipmunk and began down his slippery tree to see what had become of him. The small pond was frozen and covered with snow, and the chipmunk was sitting under his storage tree, looking upset and thoughtful. "I say, hello there, my little friend," said the squirrel as he moved right over to the chipmunk's shelter.
"Oh, hello," said the chipmunk. "I'm quite sure I don't know what to do. My home is completely frozen in, and I haven't made my second door yet," said the chipmunk dejectedly. The squirrel looked at the pond again, then back to the chipmunk. "Do you have any provisions outside your home?" said the squirrel. No,"
said the chipmunk with embarrassment in his voice.
"I was so focused on gathering enough food, I didn't dig my second door yet, or make a second stock of food,"
said the chipmunk sadly. "Well, no worries, my friend. Come with me. I will help you out," said the squirrel.
You'll... Oh, thank you, Mr. Squirrel. Thank you,"
said the chipmunk, grabbing the squirrel's paw and shaking it wildly. No need, no need," said the squirrel, blushing and taking his paw back. This way then," said the squirrel, and off they went in the direction of the old oak tree where the squirrel lived. The squirrel hurried up the tree, taking care to dig his claws in deep into the ice to avoid slipping. He ambled into his home and looked for the right size food for his hungry little friend. He saw acorns and walnuts of all kinds. But it wasn't going to be very long, thought the squirrel, until the weather warmed again, before winter. So he reached for a small seed, just the right size for the chipmunk. He scurried down the tree again and held out the seed for the chipmunk to take.
Oh, my goodness! Thank you! Thank you! That'll be perfect,
he said, and bowing low, he took the seed and ran back to his shelter through the snow. The snow stayed for only one more night, and the morning after, the squirrel awoke to the forest full of smells again. He peeked out of his hole to see a snowless forest floor and a smiling furry face looking up at him holding a large acorn. The squirrel ambled down the tree and sat up next to the chipmunk, who handed the squirrel the large acorn. "Why, what is this?" said the squirrel.
This is my gift to you for helping me when I needed it most, and for letting me stay in your wood,"
said the chipmunk cheerily. "Oh, now come. I don't need anything for that. It was my pleasure," replied the squirrel.
"I have dug my second and third entrances into my home, and have also made a second stockpile of my food for the winter,"
said the chipmunk. "My, you have been busy this morning," said the squirrel.
"And I wanted you to have this most large acorn, as, well, you see, I can't open it myself, and I know for you it would be little trouble,"
finished the chipmunk, and he once again bowed low to the squirrel. "That's very kind, my dear friend," replied the squirrel, and he at once cracked open the acorn and offered a chunk to the chipmunk, who took it, smiling. And they both enjoyed the food, knowing they had not only enough food for winter, but also new friends who care. The end.